Hello. Today I'm going to be talking about language on social media and how it's impacted through gender and code switching. Communication online is a concept that is fast growing and most commonly modernly to communicate with anyone. Social media communication has become the default, and in return has furtherly impacted the way we communicate because of how large it's gotten. My main argument of today is that cellular communication and social media posting is altered and delayed by the influence of gender that leads into code switching. So, gender and code switching are my main topics. Some preconceived ideas that I think are stereotypical about gender within social media are that there's these ideas behind men versus women, and that men should be initiating communication for one via social media. Women express more intricate topics and emotions through social media. Women post more photos. Women tend to be more excessive via these forms and more public with their emotions, with their values through social media. Women are typically more communicative and emotionally intelligent on social media communication forms, whereas men have habits of not being able to express themselves in written text through social media. In Hull's reading Oppression, we can see this very well. She touches on the idea that women in language typically express powerlessness and in order to gain economic power and social flexibility. She then explained later that sex differences in language use both reflect and reinforce the unequal status of women and men in today's society. Although this reading isn't as modern to go into the ideas of social media incorporation with them, I believe that these ideas flex themselves into it. The unequal status quo of both genders has completely altered the way that language is used on social media. And social media is the tool of these aspects. So I agree with the minimal aspects of these ideas. I think in circumstances, women aren't morphing language to express powerlessness because I think that per se is powerful. And morphing things for their own benefit is a powerful statement. This also touches on code switching by said women using code switching to their own benefit and language in their own use. So essentially, this idea is taking back language on social media forms, taking it back to society, from society, and in the way that she expresses to gain economic power and social flexibility. That social flexibility aspect comes from women and men taking back those typical status quo options. So while I agree with her ideas, I believe that women express how they feel and not how they perceive themselves to feel or how they feel that they should be on social media. I think that social media, in my personal opinion, should be more abstract and whatever you are freeing yourself to do. I brought this conversation into my interviews. I asked my first interviewer about this idea. My first interviewer was my friend Ria. She's a female. I asked her, what do you think about impacts or limits you might feel about your gender on social media? She explained that she thinks she is a more emotional person and she is a female that reflects her gender in the way she writes and communicates throughout social media. What I interpreted from our conversation was that she reflects in her language how she feels and attempts to reflect that in social media, but does find some difficult aspects. I asked my second interviewer, a male friend of mine, Michael, the same question. He explained that he hasn't ever really considered that gender takes a role in his language on social media. He explained to me that as a male, he didn't feel any pressures or attempts to make posts on social media very often. And he admitted to me that he could see that women might feel very differently. There is almost a double standard in this aspect that language reflection could only be reciprocated if you are a woman. And if you're doing so through social media, it should be more from a sensitive perspective. And seeing all other women post a lot and keeping up to date with their photos and status updates seems to be marked as a very feminine thing. He says he could really relate to that aspect from a male perspective. The next thing I asked both of them was, do you think that code switching in your language on social media impacts the language that you use? Ria, the first interviewer, answered with the perspective of thinking that code switching in terms of being careful with what language she uses on social media. And she explained to me that she said the image of how she wants to be perceived is why she code switches on social media. She explained, I censored myself and switched the way I speak when writing publicly on social media to avoid being perceived as someone not as educated or perhaps even informal use of language on social media. On the other hand, Michael explained to me that he does not use code switching on social media, but he uses it in the form of pictures. Coming from his male perspective, what I understood from our interview was that he feels societal pressures as a male to not continuously be posting and not continuously be using social media as an outlet. I believe that there's a feminine standard to be using social media as an outlet, or there might be a feminine standard to take a side on issues that happen on social media. That language reflection is very important in the female world, I believe. And he explained to me that he doesn't feel that as a male. And he likes to avoid language rather than deal with it and be incorrect within society and diminish his masculinity. Overall, from Ria's interview, I understood that she experiences the opposite end of the same ideas as Michael. She experiences that being too emotional or uncertain in her language on social media, she felt might reflect a lack of authority and thus a tone of fragility. And although this may seem that it doesn't involve itself with gender, it comes through with gender because that is the female gender status quo. And females are seen and associated with fragility and associated with not having a standard point of authority. And when you're on social media and scrolling through your apps, it is feminine voices that typically pick up on issues and share their opinions on facts. So Ria explained to me that she refrains from this as much as she can. Going back to the idea of posting and writing online, I believe that as a woman, in my perspective, outside of the people that I interviewed today, I believe that I do typically feel pressures from outside sources to post a lot. And when I am scrolling through social media and I see language being used that seems so formal to me, it takes away the enjoyment aspect of using social media. Because to me, using social media was created as a tool towards entertainment and a tool of communication that is done so quickly and in such a short period of time, which is what the attraction was. However, once we get towards today's world and social media is used, excuse me, incredibly, we have standards that come along with those facts. Altogether, what I learned from my inquiries and my interviews and studying this language online is that I believe that social media language is a living thing that changes very often. It often morphs and changes every second because of how many people are constantly posting. Every time you refresh, it's hundreds of new posts, it's billions of new people, it's millions of new tweets, and it keeps living and living, and it's hard to maintain the same level as that. Social media users, based on their gender, typically feel a need to limit and delay themselves in social media use to prevent gender norms and stereotypes from existing. And I believe that these gender influences are external factors, and whether they may be conscious or not is depending on the person. Cellular communication and social media posting is, in fact, altered and delayed by the influence of gender that leads into code switching. Here on my virtual visual aid, you can see that I entered in most of my topic sentences and my title and my sources at the bottom. Thank you very much.